Welcome to Spencer Colgan's Wallpaper, and this is a unique video. I've done several comprehensive videos on wallpaper removal, but this one is by far now the most unique. Can you just bring them in close? Here is a layer of wallpaper
that had a stubborn paper backing.
Okay, we know from previous videos how easily this comes off. In fact, if you come close, you can already see that the water is making the backing separate, right? That's easy enough. For anybody with patience, they know without gouging the wall, they can get this off easily. But take a look at this. This was a lazy job somebody did by putting this wallpaper over a second layer. And you can see the seam of the layer underneath it right here. Now, before you drive yourself crazy, how many of you are going to go through the process of getting that off? And how would you do it? We're not going to take it off. We're going to leave it on the wall. And how are we going to accomplish that? Well, we know that if water takes this off so easily, we got to get it off. Common sense, right? But water is not going to take this off so easily. In fact, somebody sealed it with oil. And water is not going to penetrate oil. At least they were smart to do that. Leave it on. What we're going to do is put a coating of this oil-based primer over that first layer of wallpaper. And then to make the wall look universal, we're going to skim coat it. Join us on the next segment as we do that. So we wet down the top layer, and this is the difficulty with which we're finding it to be removed. And that's not good enough.
There comes a point at which a paid contractor would cost too much money in labor to take the wallpaper down. A homeowner has more time to spend on this project, but there comes a point at which, look at this stuff, it doesn't become cost effective to remove.
So we're always learning something new. So I want to teach you impatient people something new. Let's talk about water and oil. You remove your wallpaper. You took all day to do it. You did a great job. And you have gouges on your wall like this that have to be repaired. Or you have glue residue all over the substrate from which you removed your wallpaper. Either way, you're left with prep work. You have to cover the glue residue. Don't try to clean this off. It'll take you another day. You got to cover the glue residue with something that's impenetrable, like oil or alcohol, bin, for example, B-I-N. And you know that alcohol and water, that alcohol is not going to reactivate the water in the glue that you're trying to cover. If you use oil, it's going to do the same job. It's not going to activate the water that's keeping the glue residue together on your wall. So one way of doing this is using oil or alcohol primer after you get your paper down. But what if you're the person who doesn't mind the smell of the oil or the alcohol, like many people do? They want you to take down the paper, clean off the glue, instead of just simply sealing it with oil or alcohol. And it's a lot of work and consequently a lot of cost and labor. But what if the guy who's lazy or impatient wants to just go right over the paper? Let's say you have grass cloth. You could never cover that with what I'm about to tell you. Grass cloth is extremely absorbent. First of all, it's a material that it's going to suck in your paint or your primer, and then you have all this texture on it. You just can't skim coat over that.
Please understand what I'm talking about here. You can leave paper wallpaper on your wall. Don't go crazy. You don't have to spend days removing it. You have to prep it and do it correctly. And I'm talking about the paper backing on all wallpapers. So wallpaper is either paper, or it's vinyl, or it's grass cloth, but it's not always paper. So you don't want to be going over vinyl. This procedure of what I'm about to do, to skim coat over wallpaper or its paper backing, would cause cracking if you did this over vinyl, because vinyl moves with the temperature. You can't see it, but it does. This procedure, my good viewers, is for that paper that you see in the left side of your screen there, or if you didn't take it off and expose that paper, it's the paper wallpaper. Before you tear it and make that brown paper visible. So we understand that this procedure of simply leaving it on, when we say it, we're talking about that stubborn paper that will not come off. The brown stuff that you see on the screen. Or even wallpaper that's on the wall, nice and tight. It's not loose. And it's not bubbling anywhere. You can go right over it with this procedure. Think about it. Doesn't your sheetrock have layers of paper over the gypsum? What is sheetrock? It's plaster that's sandwiched between paper, several layers of it. This procedure will save you time, money, and most of all, it will save you from the distress of days of removing wallpaper. Don't go crazy here. Now, I referred to wallpaper that's not loose. Even if it's loose, just scrape it off. Scrape off the loose paper. As soon as you have everything that's loose off of the wall, and that might only be a patch or two here or there, do this procedure. You'll see. Just keep watching.
So you definitely want to remove grass cloth or vinyl. You go into a hotel, right? And you see outside the elevators all that nice wallpaper. That's all vinyl. You're not going to be able to skim coat over that. You're definitely going to have to remove that. But what if you wanted to go right over your wallpaper? Could you do that? Don't they have vinyl over vinyl paste or glue that you can put over wallpaper, and then you just reattach your new wallpaper using that special glue that's called VOV, or vinyl over vinyl? Yes. So going over wallpaper can be done with new wallpaper. But this part of the video is about, what about going over the wallpaper with paint? Suppose you're too impatient to do this. So let's just show them this. Now we're waiting. This is taking longer than my 3 coatings of water. Usually after 3 coatings, this paper starts coming off for me all the time. I'm on my 4th or 5th application of water. And it will come down if I keep at it. But I'm at it now for a few hours here. But what about this procedure? going over the paper, the backing. Now, we're not talking about vinyl wall covering. We're not talking about textured wall covering that has vinyl in it. Most textured wallpaper is vinyl. And we're not talking about grass cloth. Talking about your beautiful wallpaper that's composed of paper, mostly paper. You know the stuff, you go to tear it like a dollar bill and it tears, that's paper. So, I'm going to show you a new way of doing this. For those of you who don't want to go through the expensive time. People's time is so important, right? The time of taking all of this down and waiting and waiting and waiting. Why don't we go right over this? See, this is a good thing about YouTube. You can learn from my failures if it doesn't work. And I can learn from your success when what I'm about to show you works for you as well as for me. Bring them over here. On the last part of the video, I just showed you myself rolling oil over this highly absorbent fabric that was left on the wall after the shell of the wallpaper from which it was removed was stuck to it. So this is the backing. And it's the same brown stuff you see over there that you have to wet and take off with your fingernails as you claw at it, or if you go to the phase where you're using metal spatulas to take it off. Look at this. My oil, as we spoke about a few minutes ago, is not activating the water that's used to hold the glue and this fabric down. It's not activating it. It's oil, it's not gonna do that. But if I were to roll water on it, right, it would start bubbling up and we would be looking to remove it. I'm gonna show you a new way of doing this. It's gonna save you lots of time. You wanna call me to remove your wallpaper, it's gonna cost you money. But if you have the patience to deal with the smell of the oil or alcohol, you could use alcohol and it would dry a lot quicker. I just happen to have oil on hand. But you could do this with alcohol. It's twice the price, but I suggest you use alcohol because it's gonna save you half the time to do it with oil. Go right over the backing with oil or alcohol. Wait till it dries and skim coat over it. Look at all the birds you kill. You don't have to scrape it off. You leave it on, you just skim coat right over it, and then you prime your skim coat and paint it. Just take them nice and close to this so they don't see any bubbles. There's nothing, so the question you might say, well, won't this loosen it? No. Did your wallpaper come loose in the 10 years that it was up? So why would the oil loosen it? It's not gonna loosen it because I'm not activating the water in the glue by applying paint over this. We're putting oil on it, it seals it in. And because it's fabric, it sucks the oil into the fibers of the oil, of the backing, and ties it down. And sits right over the layer of glue. We already know this because of simple chemistry. The oil and the water is not gonna mix. It's gonna tie in the glue and the backing together and lock it down. I say lock it down. See these knots here, all these little, we're just gonna scrape them off. After the oil makes them hard, after this dries, just like it's doing to, this is awesome. Look at this. This is just about dry right here. That's not going anywhere. So then we're going to put compound on it. I'm probably gonna hit it with a second coat of oil. And then we're just going to skim coat and I'll show you the process. Okay, let's go to the next segment.
For the other side of the wall behind me, where that ladder is, we have a separate, different primer. We're testing both. The other side of the wall behind me is prepped with oil, which proved to take a lot longer than this side. On this side, we're using a different primer to see what works best. And we're using Bin, which was just in my hand. B as in boy, I-N, bin. It's shellac, but don't get other shellacks if you're going to use shellac. This stuff doesn't gunk up. It's really superior. I love this product. Look at that. Now, each of these products covers over the residue of wallpaper paste and the paper and prevents it from ever coming back to life again. That's why I'm raving about these products. This is the alcohol side of the experiment. Behind me is the oil-based part of the experiment. And both worked out beautifully. Don't fret anymore over wallpaper removal. Don't go crazy with this.
As we endeavor to save ourselves lots of time, we're actually experimenting by using both oil and alcohol. And so I'll bring you over there in a moment, but for this part of the task, we're using an alcohol-based primer. It's double the cost of the oil, which I'm going to show you in a moment, but the results are quicker. Now, when you're rolling this, it's a little thicker than water. So imagine yourself rolling water on a wall and the care you would have to take in order to do it properly. If I go too fast, this will be all over the place. And so you just want to go slowly. And this is called bin primer or shellac. Now I have to tell you that if you think you can replace the quality of bin with a Sherwin-Williams substitute, in my experience, I have never seen the results from an alcohol-based primer the way I do with bin. Because I've used Sherwin-Williams as a substitute, and it coagulates too much. And it makes a coarse texture on the top surface. It gets gunky, and then you either have to sand it or give it a light skim coat. It's not worth the time. Something in bin is far superior than the other products. So I suggest you use bin. So now, what are we doing? We're going over the paper on the back of the wallpaper. Remember, this is the stuff on previous videos we have wet and removed by saturating, activating the glue underneath it, and releasing it with our fingers and scrapers and whatnot. But here, we're going over it so that I can show you perhaps a far less laborious task than what you have seen in the past. Now, you don't want to skimp on the application. You want to give it 2 coats. And why is that? You want to penetrate the paper fully, not just the top layer. If you don't penetrate it fully, you might wind up activating the glue and you'll have blisters. So use a copious amount of this on the wall. Don't spare the expense. You don't want to be sorry later on. Well, as you come close, you don't see the bubbling that you do when you wet it with water. For obvious reasons, we explained that already. So no bubbles. Now let's take you over to the oil that's still drying. Now this is already starting to dry, but our oil, I mean, this is the second coat of oil, but she's still wet, okay? So I'm gonna show you the results on both. You decide which one you wanna use. I think you're gonna go with the alcohol because of the time you're gonna save.
So we're mixing mud, right? 45-minute mud. And that's fast setting joint compound, right? You have to mix this according to your experience and according to the amount of volume you can cover in the time that it takes to dry.
Moving right along. Working out perfectly. Can you just show them the mess now that we have to fill in? After putting on 2 coats of alcohol-based primer, we're now ready to cover this. And folks, when I tell you this is as hard as your sheetrock is, these little bits and pieces here are now filled with primer. It actually absorbs the primer and makes it hard. And so now, all we have left to this otherwise very time-consuming project is to just skim coat it. We didn't have to take the stuff down. We didn't have to clean the walls. Now all we have to do is just make it flat. Now, you know I'm mixing a 45-minute mud. So, it's not gonna go on as smoothly as strong compound will. But, the good thing about it is since we're gonna be putting multiple layers, it dries rather quickly. Not even 45 minutes. This will be dry in about 25. Or at least ready to second coat. So, as you're watching this, just think about all the time you'll save if you just spend the money on the right primer and just develop your skim coating skills. And look how nice that's starting to come. How nice and flat. And what am I using to do this? I'm using a Hawk, and I'm using a 14-inch pool or boat trowel. And I'm just gonna keep going at it while we're off camera, and I'll show you the results as we proceed. So we put our first coat of compound on the wall that we did in alcohol-based primer. But remember this wall we did differently. Just to show you the qualitative differential or the time differential between alcohol and oil. This wall had the same type of mess. These little balls of paper on the wall, you can just scrape off with your scraper or with a rough hand. But I'm not worried about it because we're going to be skimming this. But what we do know is that it's covered with oil and it's hard now. And all of that paper is sealed in and it's one with the oil. So now we have a bucket of 45-minute mud here. Now there's 2 ways you can do this. One, you can roll your compound on. And with a helper, it saves your arm a lot of trouble. So if you do it like the way I just showed you, either by yourself or with a helper, it gives your arm a break rather than bending down all the time and lifting that up with one hand. But the real benefit is this. Look at the beauty of the wall that's starting to form. Just by putting an oil-based primer on top of your wallpaper backing, waiting until it dries, and then skimming it out. Now our wall should look perfect after this. I like to do 3 coats. 2 base coats, and then 1 polish coat, where you practically don't have to sand it at all. And this was what I did off camera. And these lines, you're better off leaving them in place so that when it dries, you just shave it off with your scraper before you put your second coat on. All right, I'm gonna continue. I'm gonna continue to keep showing you both sides of the wall. This took about an hour and a half longer to dry than the alcohol. But if you use the oil, if you have a big job, you won't even notice, you won't even lose time, because by the time you get to it, it'll probably be dry for you. On a big job, I'd go with the oil because it's cheaper. On a small job where you want to do it quickly, go with the alcohol. Now, my first coat of skimming never looks this marked up. But the second coat will prove to be the final coat. But the main point is that I want to show you no paper, no bubbles. You can do this. This is a new way that Spencer Colgan, his Wallpaper, is recommending that you take care of your very difficult to remove wallpaper projects, okay? Remember, this was the alcohol side, right? This is where our thermostat was. This is our alcohol side. It's dry, it's ready to get second coated. This was our oil, okay? And this is the same effect, okay? So we got a turbo fan we're gonna be putting on the wall, and we're going to be putting on the final coat. I hope you like it, and I hope that you go with this procedure, because it'll save you lots of time, lots of aggravation. You agree? Could you give me some more on the roller? Don't do it, please. So we took a wool patch. I have a crack up here. It's 3/16 of an inch. These are plaster and lath walls. This is the patch I want to use on this. Okay, either that or fiberglass mesh tape. No paper tape on these walls. It's just not the right patch for plaster and lath walls. Now let's say you have a valley going this way. A valley is a divot, a low. So you have highs and lows. That's the reason why we skim coat, right? And when you have a blade, the wider the blade, the more you're making large areas smooth. Because if you think about it, when you take a knife like this and you drag it across 10 inches, you just made 10 inches the same level. Watch this, I'm gonna make a valley. That's a valley now. All right, look at how low that is. Now what we're doing when we skim coat is we're filling in valleys. So now that valley is gone. Why is that? Because I filled it in with this 10-inch blade. And when we skim coat, we're just filling in valleys. But here's the problem we run into when we skim coat. We get overzealous and we try to make it all level. And we keep fighting these lines. And guess what you do? You spend a day sanding, make your customer angry, you got it in your lungs. The trick to skim coating is to go as many coats as you need and as thinly as you need. That's your trick. Rewind and listen to it over and over, because the main mistake people make is putting compound on too thick. Now, I'm going to pull it tight. Look at the angle I'm using. I'm not using a 90. I'm bringing it down just under 45. It's about a 38, 40 degree angle. Now, you don't need to sand this. That's done there. The trick is, can I get rid of this without messing it up and making a bunch of lines? I think so. Watch this. Wow, see how they disappear? And why is that? Because I'm going thin. But here's what happens when guys skim coat. You get impatient and you want to go thick because you think thicker, I'll cover more of the valleys. No, you're going to wind up putting 3 to 4 coats on. You're going to sand it thin, thin, thin. So let's cover the valleys again. Your blade is resting on the highs. So there's highs here. You see all of these vertical marks? The ones that touch the blade first are the highs. Where my blade doesn't touch are the lows. If this were solid, all we would have to do is fill in the lows. My question to you is, if your lows are going this way, which way do you drag your knife? This way? Or would you drag them this way? If my valley is going like that, should I drag my blade and fill it in this way or this way? Who says this way? If you said that, you're right. Let's show you what happens. It's not going to happen as well as it should if it were dry, but you make a hump when you do it the wrong way. If you look close, you'll see that the line, if you can show them this, there's an imperfection here. Let me try to exaggerate it. Okay, can you see through the camera this line still here? Can you see that? I'm going to try to fill it in again the wrong way. Okay, you can see it there. You can see I didn't fill it in because I went the wrong way. But if I went like this with the valley, I wind up filling it in. Because you're dragging your blade across the highs on each side of the low, which is the valley. And then guess what? You wind up filling it in. And to get rid of these track lines on the edge of your trowel, you go thin. Don't resort to sandpaper. You can get over that. I don't care if you're brand new at this. If you understand what you're doing, you won't need sandpaper. Trust me when I tell you. Even if that were dry, all you do is you take this 10-inch and you just scrape it off very lightly when it's completely dry, and you'll get rid of it. You won't have to sand it. And there you have it. That is what you're doing when you skim coat. The rest is mechanics on how you hold your trowel, what trowel you're using, and the angle at which you're using the trowel. That's the key to skim coating. If you can get all of those points correct, you'll do a great job. All right, see you on the next frame. So you're making the track marks with your knife and you're getting frustrated. And you're like, no, Spencer said don't take them off. Don't take them off. Leave your track marks on. Your first coat, if you go a little thick, which you shouldn't, I'm going thick because I'm not going to mess it up. But if you put it on too thick, you'll get a lot of track marks. But don't panic. When the layer dries, you take your blade at a 10-degree angle with the wall, and you just scrape it off. Now, here's how you can mess it up. You start taking your blade and you try to get it off a little more aggressively, you're going to gouge your plastic, so don't do that, okay? So that's it. And what you just learned from the last segment is now we created a valley by scraping off that line, and which way we're going to go? We're going to go with the valley so it fills it in. I'm using both sides of the valley to keep my blade up out of the valley so it fills in the valley, right? So if you were trying to fill in the space in your fingers, right, you wouldn't go like this because you know what this would do. You would go this way and you'd have a nice flat bed of compound in between the fingers. All right. So I want to show you the final coat. We're done now. This is the third coat. Look at how beautiful it is. Can you just ride them along that wall at a close angle near the wall? Now you may see color differentials. However, you're just seeing some damp mud. You're seeing some dry mud, but it's as smooth as a baby's rear end. You just take it down, and all of that is easy to achieve with the right mud and the right trowels. And there you have it. It's really that simple, folks. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comment section below. But please watch the video. Don't skip and then ask me the question that's already answered in the video. A lot of people do that. Thanks for watching Spencer Colgan is Wallpaper. And what are we going to do now before we're not wallpapering this wall. We're going to be priming this. The homeowner's going to probably use Zinsser 123. It's a good primer. And then paint it. But no sanding. Nobody likes the dust. But if you had to sand it, you can squirt a sponge sander, a little sponge that comes from 3M. And then you go scratch it on your sidewalk to make sure it's not that coarse, because you don't want it coarse. Even fine, it's too coarse for something this smooth. You just scrape it on your street, come in, and just rub it down wet if you have any rough spots. There you have it. So thanks for watching the video. Remember, this was our oil side, and we'll take you over again to the alcohol primer side. There's no difference. So I recommend to you that you go with the less expensive primer. Use the oil, because once you get the first coat of oil on the wall and then you're able to put the second, by the time you get the job set up and you're ready to start skimming, while the last part you've rolled is still damp, you can start the first and think of the money that you'll save in not using the alcohol primer. But if you insist and you want to get it, if it's a small job, by all means use the alcohol. That's for the speed. But if you have the time where you can start on the section, or you have another aspect of the job within the scope, use oil. It's less expensive. There's no difference in the quality of how my final product is with the top layer of skim between the alcohol and the oil. If you just bring them in close, other sections of the wall we still have to coat, but the alcohol side is done and this part of the oil is done. If you just look at it nice and smooth, it's really like a soft baby skin. And that's no sanding. There was no sanding here. What looks like it might be where you need sanding, it's not. It's just the color differences. It's just damp under there. So let's just take them one last time to the alcohol side, and we'll show them that how perfectly smooth this is. If you have any imperfections on it, don't sand it. Just take it when it's completely dry. Take your 10-inch knife and drag it along. If you left a track line from the edges of your trowel, just take it, just scrape them off. Because to start sanding this, what you'll do is, this has a certain flat texture now. So if you sand it, you'll change the texture.